back, everyone. I'm sure you've all seen the news stories. Biden is going to be going after what he considers to be systemic racism within the country, within the government, within the military. But a big question is still standing over this country, which is, do these programs to try to tackle racism actually reduce racism, or are they making it worse? Now, here to speak with us about this is Pat Brown and Dave Brown. They're the authors of the book, It's Black and White, How the Left is Destroying the Dream of Martin Luther King Jr. and Our Founding Fathers. It's a mother and son author team, and real great having you on the show.
Thank you, Joshua.
Now, so this is a pretty strong statement you're making, saying that the left is destroying what Martin Luther King Jr. set out to accomplish and what the Founding Fathers set out to accomplish. Now, I know a lot of people on the far, this isn't necessarily like centrist Democrats, I assume, but the far left. A lot of them believe that they're fighting for racial equality. So it's a pretty bold statement to say that they're destroying this. What is the issue you're seeing with this?
Well, I raised non-white children through the 80s and 90s. And during those times, I thought things were getting a lot better. And then I saw a complete turnaround. And I'm thinking, what happened to everything? Because things were indeed getting better. People were getting along. Blacks and whites were mixing, and they were enjoying each other's subcultures, if you want to call it that. And it was so much better as time was going on. And then it took a complete reversal. And it's very frustrating to me because, when you see your country going that direction, when you see a racial divide like this, where suddenly now blacks have to be over here and whites have to be over here, and we're not even supposed to have any real community anymore, that to me is a disaster.
Right. So in a sense, we're reproducing segregation 60 years later. And that's crazy.
Well, I was a 90s kid. I mean, I remember growing up with Dave Chappelle and, like rap was becoming popular on MTV and so on. It was actually a big shift. And I know growing up too, I mean, I don't think I ever really cared about what race my friends were. Looking back now, I can see I had a very diverse group of friends, but I don't think we ever even talked about it, actually.
I myself, I'm a 90s child, and like you, race wasn't an issue. We had, Dave Chappelle, where race was talked about, but in a funny way where you all could get together and laugh about it. It wasn't divisive and weird and nasty the way it's become today.
We used to have what we called cultural appreciation, and we could enjoy other cultures or subcultures. We could enjoy other people's music. We could enjoy other people's food. And now it's gone from cultural appreciation to cultural appropriation. So you can't even touch something that is supposedly from one group. There were some ladies out in California, I believe it was California, and maybe it was in Portland, Oregon, who knows where they were at, but they decided they'd been in Mexico and they loved tacos. They loved tacos so much they decided to have a taco stand. Oh my God. They got attacked for having a taco stand because they appropriated tacos from Mexicans. So no longer could you appreciate and have people say, well, that's really cool because these people who aren't even Mexicans love our food. So the Mexicans, by the way, weren't saying this. This was being said by the left. The Mexicans were like, we really don't care.
It goes one way. If it was the other way around, no one would care, and it wouldn't be a problem. But if white people do it, now we have a problem, and it's a big deal of it. So.
Now, I know there are people these days who argue that, well, doesn't it actually help, underprivileged people, for example, if you make them recognize that they are oppressed and you help people understand that they're oppressed? I mean, do you feel that benefits people? This is one of the big narratives, of course, right now.
I think when you convince people that they're oppressed, you create a victim mentality. You create an excuse for them to have for failure. And that never helps anybody. It never helps somebody to be told, you know what, if you fail, it's not your fault. So continue failing. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, well, I think we've all seen a lot of the BLM protests where you look at the picture and it's mostly like white college kid liberals, it seems. And, of course, I think a lot of them do legitimately believe that they're trying to do something good. Do you feel that their actions are actually helping, though?
Well, tens of billions in damages, destroyed lives, property. Is that helping anybody? I'd say no.
And this, bringing Black Lives Matter, it's very frustrating because, of course, we do care about Black lives. And I certainly do, because my children are not actually totally white. So I care about Black lives. I care about biracial lives, and I care about people. And when you start dividing people by race, where everything is about race, an interesting thing happened recently. A lot of people have heard about Gorilla Glue Girl. That just came out in the media. So Gorilla Glue Girl, she wanted to make she was a Black woman who wanted to make a really slick hairstyle. So she took Gorilla Glue and put it in her hair. And by the way, it looked really, really good. So the effect was nice, but then she couldn't actually get it out of her hair, and she's now getting surgery because the glue stuck to everything in her skin, and it's miserable and dangerous. And so now she's getting surgery. So anyway, she went on the internet and she put this information out, and everybody sort of thought it was kind of funny. And then I saw this article in USA Today, I think it was yesterday, and somebody talked about how hair products is systemic racism. So I'm like, how the heck are hair products systemic racism? And what happened was this woman who was writing this article claimed that Black women didn't get enough education about hair products. Now, I think that's a big insult to Black women who have been doing their hair for thousands of years and have used many, many kinds of products to get whatever kind of result they would like. And certainly white women have had problems with hair products. Like, hasn't a white woman ever used a bad perm and had big, huge frizz, or had a horrible hair color turned out to be some horrible red, orange nightmare? What about in the 70s when we used to iron our hair and burn it on the ironing table? So, I mean, this is ridiculous that this would be systemic. And and then she goes on to say, if you go to a store, the Black hair products are on the bottom shelf. Well, no, if you're in maybe Montana, where 95% of the people are white in a certain town, yes, you're going to have Black hair products on the bottom shelf. But I live in Prince George's County, and believe me, the white people products are on the bottom shelf because we're mostly a Black county. So this is absolutely just ridiculous. And anybody who knows history, and this is Black History Month, so hey, they should know this. Madam C.J. Walker was a Black woman who in 1905 realized that, hey, there's not enough Black hair products on the market. She went out and made a company and became a millionaire selling Black hair products. So I do not think there's systemic racism on Black hair products, but it seems like the left is finding every excuse they can to say this is Black, this is white, and anything that's Black is being assaulted and pushed down by white people, and that's not helping our country.
And I can't speak personally about hair products, obviously, but there's this tendency to treat Black people like children, like we're incapable of understanding, not to put Gorilla Glue in your hair. It's so ridiculous. And our white allies seem to condescend toward us, and that sort of paternal attitude toward us, I find insulting personally.
I've actually heard a lot of people say that the very nature of victim mentality creates a hierarchy where there are people who believe that they're serving you like, Madame Antoinette or something like that. Here's some bread, you poor man,
Well,
eat some cake. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people express that actually it bothers them, this type of culture that's coming about.
And even worse than that, if you're a Black person and you're a conservative, in my personal experience, liberals respond almost as if you're ungrateful. How dare you not appreciate what I've done for you? It's obviously very condescending. You're almost like a slave that escaped the plantation. How dare you? I provided so well for you, and you didn't appreciate what I did for you. And that's equally condescending and insulting.
Actually, I've talked with Larry Elder about this as well, and he gets called an Uncle Tom for having political views that they don't approve of. And I know he's been a lot of people I've spoken to are kind of like, what, I'm not, you want me to be equal, but you don't want me to have my own opinions when it comes to politics? How does this work?
Well, that's essentially it. The left always wants to have an open dialogue and debate, except if you disagree with them, in which case, please be quiet and sit over there. So if you're a Black conservative, you're dismissed, immediately. And our attempt right now, and why we're speaking up, is we need enough Black voices to speak up and say, hey, we disagree with what's going on. We don't like the direction this country's headed into. And if we're loud enough, I think at some point they can't ignore us. And hopefully that will slip into the mainstream and rub off on some of the liberals out there who think that all Black people think alike, are Black Lives Matter supporter, are support the Democrat policies. We want to change that sort of attitude. That's our hope.
And it's funny because when we wrote our book, one of the things we pointed out in it is that when people see us, they think we're liberal. And we have to be liberal. After all, I married a black man in 1979. I have 3 non-white children. I've traveled the world. He's traveled the world. He's spent a whole year in India going to school, spent time in Mexico. I've done the same thing. And we have friends of all races. And so everybody says, oh, my God, you're so liberal. And the problem is we're not. And we might have been more liberal at one point, but we moved toward the middle, and then we moved a little bit toward conservatism, and then more toward conservatism because we saw what the liberal thinking and the policies were doing to the country. So it's not that we aren't, quote, open-minded, but we want good policies that make our country move forward and that don't cause a divide between the races.
And part of that is not us necessarily moving to the right. It's the left is moving so far to the left that we look right-wing in comparison. I'm actually, if you look at my viewpoints, fairly moderate, but by today's standards, I'm next to Hitler.
Yeah, Dave, you actually said something. You had said something interesting a bit ago, where you said that what the left is doing with these race policies is they're bringing back segregation. That's a pretty bold statement. Can you explain that to us?
So let's talk about Black Lives Matter, which will kind of relate to that. Well, they're a Marxist organization, and people have this assumption that Black Lives Matter wants to improve race relations. I would argue that as a Marxist organization, their intent is to make race relations worse. They want more friction, more conflict, because when you create that conflict, eventually you can destroy the foundation of society so you can rebuild it in what they want. Their image is this new socialist utopia. And so they want separation. They want anger and division, because if we got along, well, they'll have no power.
Yeah, it's actually true. Actually, I was reading a book just recently about some of the early writings about the race movements in the U.S., and they actually talk about this, that they wanted to create class conscious because they believed people were oppressed and they didn't recognize the repression. And so they had to convince people that they were victims and then start rallying them to go out and protest for social change. Now, you're saying that you don't believe these protests for social change have actually benefited things. That you're saying that what they're doing is going against or destroying even what Martin Luther King Jr. envisioned and also what the Founding Fathers envisioned. Can you explain that to us?
Go ahead, Dave, because this is your thing. You're good at...
I would say, if you look at the Black community right now, with our interactions with law enforcement, for example, it's getting worse. It's when you convince people that they're oppressed and they should be angry, that bubbles over until their daily interactions with law enforcement, and that's why we're seeing more and more videos of Black men, fighting the cops, because they're told that they're oppressed. They're told that they should be angry. They're told if a cop comes and talks to you, that they're oppressing you. And so, yes, it's getting worse, not better, and that's by design.
And what's really sad about Black Lives Matter, which is amazing, is that they themselves have come out and said, we are a Marxist organization. They have their whole I think it's 10 rules they have for the organization, their manifesto, shall we say. It says we want Black power for Black people. So there's nothing in their organization that wants white people around at all. And yet there are many Blacks who do not know this. There are many whites who do not know this, and they actually think Black Lives Matter is something wonderful. And it's amazing that they don't realize what kind of organization they are promoting.
And Black Lives Matter was kind of caught with their hand in the cookie jar with that part on their website about, rejecting the Western nuclear family. And that was rightfully called out. And very quietly they removed that because, they're Marxists, but they don't want to necessarily be caught being Marxist, super Marxist. And even for them, that they had to go, okay, that one looks bad. People are onto us. We'll back up a little bit. That's gone. We were just kidding. They're not kidding. And that whole thing with the attack on a nuclear family, especially as a Black person, where in the Black community, the illegitimacy rate is one of the biggest reasons why there's so much Black crime and black dysfunction in the black community. So for an organization that wants to help black people, they were actually encouraging, rejecting the nuclear family. That's the main issue in the black community. How can you be for black, improvement if that's one of your goals? It's absolutely in contradiction, and that exposes what they really are. Not a pro-black organization, a Marxist organization using black people as tools, as their foot soldiers in this revolutionary cause they have to want to destroy our foundation.
Yeah, actually, I remember watching the stories on that when they removed that part of their website because people noticed it. They're like, what does destroying the nuclear family have to do with racial equality? And that's a good point, too, is that wouldn't that actually make worse a lot of the problems you're seeing? Because, fatherlessness is one of the big causes of this, no matter what race you are, actually, when it comes to the challenges people face.
Right, you can trace the crime rate in the black community with the illegitimacy rate. So since the 1950s, it's gotten worse, and it correlates with the lack of black fathers. So ironically, as we got more freedom in the black community and more legal rights, there's more crime and more dysfunction. So that's the main issue driving all the issues in the black community: illegitimacy, lack of fathers, lack of family.
And one of the interesting things about Black Lives Matter is they went after the police. And because they've gone after the police, the police are now having trouble recruiting anybody to be in the police, especially black people, because who wants to be an Uncle Tom in their own community, right? So now when the police have their academies, they used to have academies with like maybe 80, 90 people in them, and now they have 8 or 9. And so they're so understaffed now that they can't even serve the community properly. And who are they serving? A lot of times it is the black community. And the black community doesn't need less help, they need more help. And yet Black Lives Matter has pretty much put a big damper on that and has destroyed a lot of jobs. This was a great opportunity for a lot of black people to get jobs as police officers. Now they don't want to do it. So what does that tell you about Black Lives Matter? Are they helping the black community or are they not helping?
It shouldn't be defund the police. It should be fund the police, give them more training, so that we can improve relationships. Defunding it does the exact opposite, as you pointed out.
And it's not that there isn't work to be done in the United States. There's always work to be done, and there's always good ways to approach things. Like, for example, with Black History Month. Black History Month was very popular back in the day when pretty much there weren't very many black people in the history books. That has improved over time, and it could be improved some more. But we don't want to turn Black History Month into Black Lives Matter Month, where, as a matter of fact, in Prince George's County, where I live, they actually approved Black Lives Matter as running Black History Month. So now they're introducing racism against white people. They're introducing the Marxist theories in that month, and that is not where you want it to go. What you really want to do is expand the history of black people into our entire American history. Work on that, but don't cause more division.
Yeah, it used to be a celebration of black people, a positive thing that we all, could partake in, and now it's a celebration of everything to be angry about, right. And I think it's destructive.
Now, another phenomenon we're seeing is this white guilt and the encouragement of it. I think we've all seen the videos of, these activists walking down the street, black activists walking down the street and, making white women get on the ground and like kiss their boots. And they do it. They do it. And I mean, do you feel this helps in any way? I'm curious.
I feel bad for some white people because a lot of them are frightened. They're absolutely frightened to say the wrong thing, post the wrong thing. Am I going to lose my job, my career? Will I be a social outcast? And, that's honestly by design. White people make up the majority of this country. So that's the group that Black Lives Matter needs to frighten so that they're scared and don't fight back. Because black people, we're 13%. 13% is not going to overturn the majority. They need white people to submit. And that's what we're seeing right now, that attempt.
The other thing we're seeing is this race consciousness. And this actually surprised me when I first started seeing the writings on this, because they don't want people to become blind to skin color. When I was growing up, that was what they wanted. They wanted you to not look at the color of a person's skin, right? That was Dr. King's idea, to judge a person by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. It's changing now where they want you to look at a person's race and to really assume their privilege or their persecution based on the color of their skin. I'm curious, do you feel that the recognition of race, I guess for you, Dave, I mean, do you feel more people see you as your race now rather than just a person? How do you feel this has affected things?
Yeah, I've always found that my personal experience, people will see your race and, there are stereotypes. But my thing has always been, as soon as you talk to somebody and you have some rapport with them, people stop seeing race and it just sort of melts away. And the way to get to a colorblind society is by dialogue, by conversation, by interacting with one another in a positive way. And that causes race to sort of melt away and become background. And now it's, I think I can, in your experience, being a white person walking around, her race has definitely stood out in our county, which is majority black. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, so for her, not just myself, her skin color is, changing her interactions with people in public.
And what's really sad is that once upon a time, I could go into places which were predominantly, not just my county, but for work. I worked with hospitals in one of my careers as a medical sign language interpreter, and I used to work in predominantly black hospitals. And when I went in and was signing with people, and they were like, "Oh, you're so cool," because I signed, by the way, Black American Sign Language because I worked in the black community. And the black people that I worked with thought I was awesome. And now I notice that if I walk into that same place, now I'm looked at like, "Oh, you're a white person." And by the way, one of the things that's happening, which is really sad, is there's this new concept that only a black person can understand a black person. So if you're a black person, you should have a black doctor because white doctors will not do a good job with you. And in the medical sign language community, there's this new concept that if a black person goes into a hospital or any place else, they deserve a black sign language interpreter who understands them culturally and understands Black American Sign Language. Well, the funny thing is, there's a lot of black interpreters who do not sign Black American Sign Language because they never learned it. I do know it, but they're going to send the black person who doesn't know it instead of the white person that does know it. So it's all based on the color of your skin, as opposed to, can you do the job, and are you doing the job well? And it's a very sad thing when we're going to start picking people that have to match us racially. That's what white people used to do. Remember, white people used to say, "I don't want a black doctor." Now white people don't seem to care about that, but now black people say, "I don't want a white doctor." It's like,
and let me, you're talking about we're assigning, personal, behavior to race and the way you talk or the way you dress. And I personally find that extremely racist. And, it's funny, we look at someone like Kamala Harris and Cory Booker, people who are of color, who grew up privileged. And one thing I've noticed, and I find kind of sad, is that they feel compelled in certain interviews to prove that they're black. By, I listen to hip hop. Oh, I have a friend called Corn Pop or T-Bone or Cory Booker. He has his friend T-Bone that we find didn't actually exist. And there's this need by black politicians to try to prove their blackness. And it's really sad because you are who you are. If you're black, it's not a choice. It's your skin color. It's not who you know or how you talk or what kind of music you listen to. I like country music. Does that make me not black? No, it's good music. Sorry, I like it. It's cultural. I grew up, with some white collar white blue collar friends, and I listen to country music. And I moved to the Eastern Shore, Maryland, which is very rural, and there's more country music out there. I'm like, well, you know what? This stuff's pretty good, and I started, liking it. So, anytime we assign, characteristics to somebody because of their race, that's the most racist thing you can do, and I think that's very counterproductive and hurts black people.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. You said it hurts black people. That's an interesting statement. How do you see this hurting them, actually?
Well, if you're told if you're black, you need to talk a certain way. The reality is when you go for a job interview somewhere and you're speaking Ebonics, you're not going to get that job. If you're told that it's okay to walk around dressed a certain way with your pants hanging around your ankles and your hair in all sorts of, weird fashions, people will judge you on that, and that will affect your prospects in finding a career and moving through corporate America. So telling black people that they should behave a certain way, and unfortunately a lot of these, black stereotypes as far as how we can behave aren't the most productive. And we should, no black person should be told that their skin color determines, how they talk or dress. That's very, very harmful to them.
This is interesting. So is it accurate to say that what you're saying, I guess, is that it actually encourages stereotypes, where you're
Absolutely.
expected to fit into a stereotype because of the way that it's framed? Is this accurate?
That's what it is. And a lot of times liberals will project something on this people in the idea that's helping them. And it's their own sort of fantasy of how they view you. So, the liberal sees me and they go, well, you're supposed to be A, B, C, and D. I'm going, wait a second. You're assigning that based on what? My skin color? And you're not racist? And that's what we're saying.
Now, Dave, of course, I was reading through your book, and I know you're quite well versed in this. You mentioned a bit about what the Marxists are doing. You said that they're basically trying to use people based on their race as their foot soldiers for this movement they have. And, ironically trying to stir people up and stir up emotions that a lot of them didn't have, actually, by the admission of a lot of these individuals, these Marxists and progressives. I'm curious, based on your research, what do you see the intention of this being? What is the end game for this?
Well, what is the 1619 Project? What is their attempt? Why are we tearing down statues? They want to erase the foundation of what America is. You cannot build a new society on an old foundation. If you understand Marx, his philosophy was a revolutionary philosophy. It requires a changing of the guard, and in this case, our capitalist, liberal society. And so the intentions of the modern day Marxist is to erase that, to remove it. And right now they're trying to do that by convincing people that it's racist to appreciate George Washington or Thomas Jefferson, who were slave owners. They want to convince white people that they should abandon all of their history. And let's face it, white people did found this country for the most part. So that's what they're trying to do over time, is to, especially we see that with the college kids. They're so far gone down this rabbit hole of just attacking everything that's traditional in this country. And so, yes, their long-term goal is to destroy the foundation of this country and rebuild their new society, their new utopia, which I think will look more like 1984 than any utopia.
Yeah. And it's interesting because if it wasn't a Marxist attempt, we would see a slower, like we do with Martin Luther King. After he, changed things and the civil rights movement went through, we saw a gradual change where there were more rights, obviously rights for black people, and there were more black people going into politics and into the medical systems and into businesses, and things started changing where things were growing together. And if they wanted to continue that, if truly we just wanted to continue that this society become more colorblind, and as the society, the demographics change because there are more black people than there used to be, or more brown people coming in from other countries, then it would just slowly change, and that would be just dandy. They don't like the slow change. In fact, they don't want the change at all. And that's why, but people don't understand that they want to stop that change. They want to destroy everything so they can get what they want, which is a completely different society.
Now, just last question here. Where do you see America heading with this? You've watched the changes over the years. You've kind of seen the changes. Where is it heading, first of all? And what do you think the solution is to this? If these movements aren't the solution, what is the solution?
Well, as far as where it's heading, I think we have a living example in China, where we have a totalitarian government fused with the private sector, working in combination to be oppressive, and we see that here now with social media and the Democrat Party coordinating with the social media giants to suppress free speech and to punish people. People are losing their jobs for having the wrong political opinion. Now we are seeing these sort of ideological tests being given to the military. Are you a Trump supporter? Are you on this board? Have you said this or that? We're going to, purge you from the military. So I think we're heading toward the Chinese model. And how do we stop that? Well, that's the big question. And I will say this about that: it's an issue of organization. The left, by nature, they organize. That's what they do. They start in college, joining groups and organizing. What do Republicans do? Conservatives, in college? Well, there's 4 of them wearing bow ties, drinking beer, and that's, well, of course we're going to lose. So it's not in the nature of conservatives and libertarians to want to organize and create a structure to fight back. And unfortunately, we're probably 80 years behind the left in this matter. So the very first thing we need to do is remember, we can't win just by having one guy like Donald Trump have power. We need the organization behind them, and that happens at the micro level. So that's where we need to start at.
Yeah, and this concept of unity that is being pushed, Biden pushed this whole unity thing through his whole, as he was moving toward the presidency, unity, and now that he's there, not so much unity, but still unity is being pushed, that if you don't just go along with the program, you don't want unity. And people are believing this. They feel guilty if they don't want unity. But we have to stand up and say enough is enough. We want people to get together, but not with the fake unity you're putting together. We need to work to make sure that we keep our society and our country the kind of society and country we want, and not have it go downhill just because we don't want to cause trouble and we don't want to feel guilty. So unity, yes, but not the kind of unity that's being pushed.
Yeah, and I think that's a problem. There's a lot of people, deep down may have problems with what's going on, but they're just too frightened to actually stand up and say anything. It's easier to lay back and, you know what, I have my house here in the suburbs. My kids are safe. I got enough money to go on vacation once a year. Please leave me alone. Go Black Lives Matter. I don't want to deal with this. So.
And the more people that do that, the more we just lose out, because there's not enough people standing up in a good way. Not in a crazy way, but in a good way, saying, look, here's where we want to go, and we're going to also push forward for unity, but let's do it in a sensible fashion and a legal fashion and a right fashion, and one that supports the Constitution of our United States.
Great, thank you. So just for our viewers again, their book is Black and White, How the Left is Destroying the Dream of Martin Luther King Jr. and Our Founding Fathers. And Pat Brown, Dave Brown, thank you again for being on Crossroads.
Thank you, Joshua. This was a great interview. We enjoyed being with you.
Thank you.